Boa tarde a todos. Com grande satisfação, damos início à segunda conferência do 12º Colóquio de Estudos Vikings Escandinavos e da segunda Viking, organizados pelos Núcleo de Estudos Vikings Escandinavos. Nessa sessão, teremos o privilégio de ouvir o professor Morten Søvsø, uma referência no campo de arqueologia escandinava. O professor Søvsø é chefe do departamento de arqueologia do Museu do Oeste, em Ribe, Dinamarca, e dedica sua carreira ao estudo das escavações arqueológicas na Jutlândia, uma região crucial para a compreensão do mundo viking. Sua vasta experiência e seu compromisso com a pesquisa tornaram uma figura central em seu campo, e ele é autor de uma miríade de livros publicados que enriquecem a nossa compreensão sobre o passado escandinavo. É uma honra tê-lo conosco para compartilhar seus conhecimentos. Sem mais delongas, passo a palavra ao professor Morten Søvsø para dar início à sua palestra. Thank you, Professor. You have the floor.
Thank you for the introduction. I think I was able to pick up a bit of what you said, and it sounded correct, so I hope everything is in order. But thanks a lot for inviting me for this conference. And for the next hour or so, I'll be talking about what I work with and what I do research in. That is the early towns of Northwest Europe, the so-called trading towns of the Viking Age, the Emporia, as they are often referred to in research. And of course, my interest in studying these towns comes from the work that I do in Ribe, the town in which I live and where I have been doing archaeology for the past 20 years or so. And in my talk, I will of course be talking about the archaeology of Ribe, but I will also be talking about the general phenomenon of urbanization in Northwest Europe. And I think I will just start and see if everything works. And it seems as if everything is working. When we talk about towns in Northern Europe, and we go back to antiquity, to the time of the Roman Empire, there were no towns in Northern Europe. Northern Europe was inhabited by Germanic tribes, and in the Germanic societies, there were no towns. However, the Romans, of course, was a civilization where towns were all over the place. So we had a very divided Europe with an urban culture in the Roman Empire and a culture with no towns in Northern Europe. And if we look at what a town is and how you could define a town, if we look at the towns in the Roman Empire, the towns there, they were both centers for administration. They were places where you could collect taxes, where you could worship the gods, also where power was situated, and of course, also where trade took place, because you also had the forum, the marketplaces where people exchanged goods. And the Roman towns, they were also characterized by a lot of stone architecture, so very permanent buildings that could stand for centuries, even millennia sometimes. So these towns were well known in Europe, but what happened after the decline of the Roman Empire in the 5th century was also that there was a huge urban decline. If we turn to Northern Europe and look at the towns that we got up there in the northern part of Europe, they are actually not very much like the Roman towns. Instead, the towns in Northern Europe are all about trade. So they are really marine trading sites, and they are not really administrative centers because there wasn't really a big or developed state behind them who needed very much administration. So instead of looking like Roman towns, they were situated where trade could take place. That was mostly on riverbanks or on the foreshores. If you look at the reconstruction drawings on the pictures, you can also see that there was a huge difference between the appearance of a Roman town and of an emporium. And what you're looking at is a reconstruction drawing of Rome in the 9th century, where you have, of course, lots of buildings from the glorious past of Rome still standing, and then some quite modest early medieval houses. And at the bottom picture, you can see a reconstruction of the largest town in Northwest Europe, Dorestad, and it does not look very impressive compared to Rome. It's just small wooden buildings built on the bank of the river Rhine. So these Northern European towns, they were trading towns, all about exchanging goods and not so much about building big, impressive buildings. And another thing which makes these early towns quite fascinating is the fact that they are so relatively few. Even though archaeology has been done in many, many towns in all over Northwest Europe for the last 100 years or so, we only know of 10 of these 8th century trading towns. And those are the ones dotted on the map there with the red dot. And because they are so few and far between, the people who excavate them rarely know each other. And since they are also situated in different countries today, when the excavators publish the results, they do that in different languages. There are also different heritage legislation in the different countries, and also very different research agendas. And it can also be quite difficult to access data about the excavations depending on the laws and rules in the different countries. So that makes them actually quite difficult to get a hold on because you have to study sites in both England, France, the Netherlands, Germany, Denmark, Sweden, and even Poland to get the full picture of these early trading towns. And also, if you compare it to a modern map of towns in Europe, you would find many thousands of towns in the area displayed on the map there. So it's quite fascinating to think back to the 8th century, where there were actually probably only 10, perhaps a few more we don't know of, but still not many more than 10 towns in all of Northwest Europe. Before talking a bit more about the trading towns, I will talk about how we do archaeology in Denmark, because when you study a site, you also have to find out how are they actually doing archaeology on this site, because that has a lot to say about how we can interpret the data and how we can understand what is being published. And in Denmark, archaeology is a state monopoly. So we don't have private companies doing excavations like there are in many other countries. So the state controls archaeology, and the state has delegated archaeology to 27 different museums. And if you know how small a country Denmark really is, you can find it quite funny or fascinating to think about that 27 different museums do archaeology in Denmark. But I think that's a very Danish solution, small, but also quite good solutions. There are quite ups and downs about it, but it means that there are archaeologists on the lookout for good sites to excavate all over the country, and we do a whole lot of archaeology in Denmark because we have all these museums. And also because we're doing quite a lot of archaeology, we get to know the different areas we work in very, very well. But of course, sometimes it can be a bit difficult to find out what the colleagues are doing and get access to the data. But in general, it's not that big a problem. And if we look at the area where I do archaeology, Museum West, then you can see it there on the map on the right. We cover 4 municipalities. That was something like 60 church parishes in the medieval period and something like 313 historical villages. It's a bit over 2,000 square kilometers. That's 5% of Denmark. And at the moment, we are 20 to 25 archaeologists employed at the museum. So if you take the 5% and say that equals 20 to 25 archaeologists, you can do the math and find out that there are more than 500 archaeologists employed in Denmark doing archaeology all the time. So we are excavating quite a lot. Before talking about the towns, we also have to take a look at what really happened after the decline of the Roman Empire. I mentioned at the beginning that there were no towns in Northern Europe, but of course on the Rhine and so on, there was part of the Roman Empire, so there were lots of towns down there. But the period before the Viking Age, or the period in which the Viking Age is a part of, is called the Early Middle Ages, the period from roughly 500 to 1000 AD. And in older research, it was often referred to as the Dark Ages, mainly the period between AD 500 and 800. And of course, that has to do with that it was very difficult to find out what really happened. Why was urban culture at such a low? Why was there so much migration? Why was there so few written sources? And why was, on a broad scale, the archaeological signal from the period as weak as it was? And it was actually also the period in which there was no emperor in Western Europe, because there was no Roman emperor, and Charlemagne had not yet become Holy Roman Emperor as he was announced or proclaimed in AD 800. So after this strange Dark Age, it was followed by the Carolingian Empire, and that was really a revival of the sort of the inheritance of Rome. But there was this interregnum, or this period of 300 years, that was called the Dark Ages. What was it really that happened? And of course, I was saying that we did not have towns in the Germanic areas, and that includes Scandinavia. And of course, Denmark was a totally agrarian society back then. So instead of towns, there were what we call central places in the research and the literature, but really it's more like it's elite residences. Magnet farms inhabited by the Iron Age aristocracies. And there you see some of these sites on the map that has been more or less excavated, and they more and more pop up in the archaeological record, and there are many more than you see there on the map, but they are all over Denmark and was sort of the more town-like structures from the Iron Age and into the migration period. And if you look at these central places and look at what's being found there, then you find lots of nice stuff, because you can excavate hall buildings where a lot of feasting took place, a lot of sacrifice of precious metals, foods, all types of stuff that you would sacrifice to the gods. and this sort of archaeological signal is often referred to as what we would call conspicuous consumption, the place where the local lord or magnate displayed his wealth, and also, of course, sacrificed to the gods. And one thing that is starting to appear in the archaeological record is actually that some of these central places or elite residences, they are situated quite close to where later medieval towns appeared. So it seems really as if there is some sort of continuity, that a lot of places, some of these central places were followed by medieval towns. And here you see some of the nice finds that has been done in connection with some of these central places. So they were in many ways the precursors to the towns. I was talking about these dark ages and what caused them. And one thing that has come out of climate research is, of course, the volcanic eruptions of AD 536 and another one in AD 539-40 that perhaps took place in El Salvador. I think it's a bit debated, but the most recent literature I have delved into suggests that it's El Salvador, but there could be other places on the globe as well. But these volcanic eruptions were, of course, super volcanoes, so it was a huge disasters, and the idea the idea that something really bad happened to the climate, of course, has to do with all the climate research that's being done at the moment. But in short, these volcanic ash layers have been detected in the ice cores that has been taken out of the Greenland ice or many other places on Earth. And you can also find very narrow year rings in the dendrochronological record, as you can see there on the image. And then there are also some written sources from different places on the globe, both from the Byzantine Empire and from China and so on, which tells us about summers without sun, lots of famine and so on. And also we have an epidemic in Europe, the Justinian plague of AD 547, which may very well be associated with a huge crisis caused by famine because of crop failure. And this idea has been debated in archaeology. Can we see this in the archaeological record? And of course, it's been discussed quite a lot, but there seems to be forming, I think, some sort of consensus that something actually happened, and that we may have had a quite severe cooling in Northwest Europe, which probably led to a quite pronounced population decline. And on this quite boring image on the right, what you see there is settlement continuity on the island of Funen. And you have to imagine that each line represents one excavated settlement where you have used C14 dating to date the settlement remains. And what you can see is that a whole lot of settlements, they seem to end in the 6th century or between 500 and 600, as you can see up there. And then in the 7th century, the dark areas are the existing or the dated settlements from that period. There are very few settlements, and then you see a growth in settlements again. But this is based on carbon 14 dating from settlement excavations. And we see this picture all over Denmark when we do archaeology. Settlements from around AD 550 to AD 700 are actually very, very hard to find. So it seems as if there actually was a quite huge population decline, followed by this AD 536 event. And here you see some of the villages, or just an example of some of the villages that we are excavating all over Denmark in huge numbers. Those are nice farmsteads from the 3rd, 4th, and 5th, and early 6th century. When we carbon date them, we can see that they all disappear by the middle of the 6th century. So it seems to have been something very, very bad that happened. And of course, this is also backed by some myth material. The Norse sagas talk about the Fimbul winter and so on. And something that has also been connected to this huge crisis is, of course, all the gold offerings that we know from the archaeological record, because before anyone knew about this possible climate crisis, we knew that there was a whole lot of gold being offered in the 6th century. So in older research, that was actually perhaps seen as the richest period in all of Danish history. Today, researchers have a tendency to think that it was probably the most desperate period in Danish prehistory, where people were actually offering all the gold they had to the gods to try and appease them so that the sun would come back. So different types of sources point in the direction of a huge crisis leading to a population decline. And this actually could also be a very good explanation for this phenomenon, the Dark Ages. But of course, things improved once again, and by the at the latest, by the middle of the 7th century, the climate improved again, and sort of Northern Europe came out of the deep freezer. And now we can see that we enter a period of prolonged economic growth. You see settlements, they are coming back again, and we probably also saw a rise in population numbers again. And this period here from the mid-7th century is also the time in which we see the appearance of towns in Northwest Europe, because from now on we get the Emporia, the trading towns that were the first towns of Northwest Europe. And if you look at these early towns, they are situated in some very interesting places, because they are not situated at the center of the kingdoms of the time. It's not like they are situated just next to the king's hall or something like that. No, instead, these trading towns are situated in the border zones where you could meet other traders sort of on the halfway. So they are not center towns, they are border towns, placed where you could meet with foreign traders and exchange goods. They seem also to have been controlled by the early kings of the time, and you can actually it's very evident in England, because there you have 3 large emporia, Hamwick, which is Southampton today, that belonged to the Kingdom of Wessex, while Londonwick, present-day London, belonged to Mercia, and Ipswich, has the same name today, belonged to East Anglia. And of course, the most famous of all the emporia, Dorestad, was initially Frisian, but early on it was conquered by the Carolingians. And of course, Dorestad was also situated in a border zone, because it was in the border zone between the Rhine area and the North Sea. So that was, of course, the quite very large economies that were able to meet there. So Dorestad also became by far the largest of these early trading towns. What is also quite conspicuous about them is that they seem to have had coin economies most often before other parts of societies started to use coins. And the idea behind using these coins was probably that the Emporia was a source of income for the kings, perhaps also in societies where there was not much tradition for taxation. Of course, the Romanized areas, they knew everything about taxes, but perhaps in the Germanic areas, there was not a very long tradition for taxation. So this could probably be some of the beginnings of taxation. And one of the researchers who sort of framed the current view of the Emporia was Richard Hodges, who a long time ago wrote a quite famous book called Dark Age Economics. It was based on not very much archaeology, because there wasn't very much archaeology when it came out, but still, I think the general model that he suggests still stands. And there's an image that shouldn't be there. No. Okay, but sorry. If we look at Dorestad, and I apologize, it's been covered by a map of Jutland. That wasn't supposed to be like that. But you should imagine you saw the picture of Dorestad before. It was really only wooden-built small huts, not very impressive to look at, but it extended for a long stretch of the Rhine riverbank. And Dorestad was a wonderful archaeological site with very, very rich finds. But unfortunately, most of Dorestad was dug away in the late 19th, early 20th century, because the rich black soils covering the site was very good to fertilize the agrarian fields around it. So the farmers dug it away before any professional archaeology could be done. But Dorestad, so a lot of Dorestad disappeared, sadly, in that way, but other excavations has been done since, so we know quite a lot about Dorestad today, nevertheless. And also Dorestad was a large mint, and here are some of the coin types that were struck in Dorestad in the 7th and early 8th century. And these three coins, actually, they are finds from Ribe or around Ribe, have been found by metal detector. And they probably ended up here because some of the local magnates also took a trip down to Dorestad to see what they could buy down there. And perhaps they were quite inspired by what they saw, because around AD 700, the first town in present-day Denmark, Ribe, was founded as sort of a mini Dorestad. With the foundation of Ribe around AD 700, a whole new concept enters the South Scandinavian societies. And if we look at what Ribe is, or where Ribe is situated in the landscape, I think there's a good reason why they actually picked exactly that spot to place a town in. Because Ribe, of course, is situated on a navigable North Sea harbor. There's a river, small river running through the town. But Ribe also is the crossing place of several important roads, both the main road of Western Jutland and the main roads of Eastern Jutland. So if you want to be able to reach a large hinterland with nice agrarian products, and also be able to access the North Sea. Ribe is actually the best place that you can find in all of Jutland. So I think that was the main idea behind placing Ribe where Ribe is placed. And if we look at what Ribe looked like in the 8th century, it was actually more or less just a one-street town, as far as we know. There was just one street along the bank of the river, quite similar to what you saw at Dorestad before. Along that street, there were lots of narrow plots where houses stood shoulder by shoulder, but not very well built or large, impressive houses. It was just wickerwork walls and so on. So not very impressive at all. But some of the activities that went on in the town, and I'll come back to that, were actually quite impressive. And there you can see the plot structures, and also now note the blue dots. Those are wells from the 8th century that I will tell you a little bit more about in a few slides. And also at Ribe, we have a quite large pagan burial ground, because this, of course, was before the Christian missionaries started to appear in the later 9th century. So this pagan grave field is actually also quite interesting, because we find lots of quite different grave customs. We find both cremation graves, inhumation graves. Some are situated or orientated north-south, others east-west. Some are in hugger position, some are supine, and so on. So what we see is really different cultural traditions for burial that coexist here on the burial ground of Ribe. So that also tells us something about that the population of the town was very heterogeneous. So people from many places lived and died in Ribe. I mentioned the wells before. Here is one of them. And this well shaft was set with 2 reused oak barrels. We could do dendrochronology on them, and they were dated to around 712 AD. And you can also provenance the oak to see where it grew as a tree. And these barrels are actually from the Mainz region in Germany. So and they held about 800 liters, so quite large barrels. And there is actually no reason to doubt that they were wine barrels, and similar wine barrels have been found in Dorestad as well. So probably also wine in quite large quantities arrived at Ribe in the early 8th century. So this is also the first evidence we have of sort of a wine tradition in Southern Scandinavia on a larger scale. So quite interesting as well. And of course, it underpins also what could be one of the attractors when you went to the market in Ribe, that you could actually buy wonderful wine that you had never tasted before. And have you been reading about Ribe? You have probably come across the drawing that you see there on the right. It's a drawing that you should forget everything about, because it is totally wrong. Sadly, it's a very nice drawing, so I think it's difficult to remove it from the literature. But it displays what we thought in the 1990s, when the idea was that Ribe was sort of an open marketplace with only small tents and not regular houses standing on the plot. Instead, only very small houses, as suggested by the drawings. We have done excavations later on, which clearly shows that we were wrong in the 1990s. And now we know that these small fences that you can see surrounding the plots, they are instead house walls. So instead you have to imagine, as I have tried to do with the black dotted lines, that you instead really had houses standing shoulder by shoulder as gable houses fronting the pedestrian lane that you see there in the middle. So a much more town-like structure than the idea was before. And these houses are really not very impressive. We excavate more impressive houses out on the farmsteads in the countryside. But what is really impressive about Ribe is when you look at the archaeological record, what is embedded in all the layers, all the rubbish layers that the town created during the 8th and 9th century. Because here you really see a reflection of a lot of the activities that went on in the town. And what is so special about Ribe is that it was one of the connectors to the outside world, and all the raw materials, the exotic raw materials that you needed to make, for instance, glass beads or precious metal brooches and so on, that came in via Ribe. So because you could get the raw materials in Ribe, of course, also the specialized craftsmen settled in Ribe and produced all their wonderful products here. And of course, the finished products, they were sold off, so we don't really find them. But the waste products that came out of the production, they were just left on the plots and became embedded in the archaeological record. So today we can excavate those and see the activities that went on. And this makes Ribe a quite unique site in archaeology, because there is actually no other known site that has such a wonderful stratified deposit from the 8th and 9th century. And actually, if you want to study some of the finds from Ribe, they are all accessible on the internet. It's free access, and you can download all the images of the finds. There are more than 100,000 images of finds and so on. And in the discussion after my talk, I can put up a link to the collection. So if any of you have any special interest in studying glass beads or early coins or something like that, then there is every chance to find out more about it. And another thing which is very fascinating about these layers underneath Ribe is that you could, of course, study how things developed, because, of course, you have the oldest layers at the bottom, and if you can date those, you know when things began, and then you can see that the layer on top, of course, is younger, and so on and so on, and you can study all the finds embedded in them and find out, well, this bead type was succeeded by this bead type, and so on. And we have done that in many excavations, and we can really see some of the patterns quite clear now. And especially when it comes to the coins, there is a very conspicuous and quite fascinating picture that has emerged. Because if you look at the beginning of Ribe, the time from around 700 to around 725, we can see that coins actually were used in the town from the beginning. So we can see that traders came to the town and they exchanged stuff and they used coins. But these coins, they are not local, they are foreign. So these are typically Dorstad coins that was used here in Ribe, like the porcupine and the continental runic types. So foreign coins were circulating in Ribe and were accepted as a payment. Then around 725, there is an abrupt change, and all the foreign coins disappear from the archaeological record, and instead just one coin type takes over. It's the one on the picture, the Wodan-monster chefe, and for almost 100 years, this is the only coin that we find in the layers from Ribe. So what is really happening is that a monopoly coin is introduced by a coin issuer and is able to exclude all other coins from circulation. So this is actually, since it dominates so clearly, it's a successful strategy. And what is really happening, of course, is that the foreign traders, the merchants, they still brought their foreign coins here to Ribe, but they were only allowed to trade in the local coin. So they had to go to the king or his representative to exchange their foreign coins to the local ones that they and use those for trade in the town. And of course, the king he took a payment or a tax or a tariff, quite modern word now, to pay for all this. So in this way, the coin system also becomes a source of income for the early kings. So for 100 years, they continued minting the same coin with some changes, but still roughly the same coin. And by around 820 or so, a new coin type is introduced. It's thinner and larger, but has roughly the same weight. And but still, it's the same motif, more or less, as the older Wodan-monster chefe. So this monopoly coin system is in function in Ribe and seems to be quite successful for 100 to perhaps 150 years or so. And if we look at where we find these coins in excavations, then you can see that the red dots indicates how many coins were found in different excavations. And you can clearly, and the gray areas are excavated areas. So you can clearly see that the coins are found more or less on the plots, and they are all found as single finds. So it is casual losses during the exchange of coins that we see. So they were clearly used in trade transactions on the plots. And today we have 282 shatters, all in all, from excavations in Ribe, and 226 of those are of the Wodan-monster type. Now we move from Ribe to one of the other emporia, because it is more or less the same story, but also a little bit different. Now we jump to the southern Baltic coast, close to the medieval town of Wismar, where there is a village called Groß Strømkendorf. And that place was excavated in the 1990s, and it's quite different from Ribe because today the site is abandoned, so it is just cultivated fields. So all the wonderful stratigraphy that we still have in Ribe, because we have a modern town standing on top of it, that is long gone in Rerik. So all the layers are plowed out, but still there's a lot of finds in the topsoil. So when you do excavations there, you cannot really use the stratigraphy very much, but instead large areas have been accessible to excavation. And also in Rerik, there's been quite a lot of coastal erosion, so also some parts of the settlement has been lost to the sea, so we can't say very much about that, of course. But in the archaeological record from Rerik, we see the same activities that we saw in Ribe. We have the glass bead making, we have the metal casting, we have the comb maker, and of course also amber workers and so on. And also in Rerik, they have found quite a lot of wells with preserved timbers where they could do dendrochronological dating. And that gave dates from 735 and up until 811. So Rerik seems to have been founded just a little later than Ribe. And like Ribe, there is also a very large burial ground associated with the settlement. And like in Ribe, this burial ground also displays many different burial customs reflecting a mixed cultural population. And in the 1990s, when the excavations went on, they did not use metal detectors. But since then, they have started metal detecting the area, and that has actually turned up more than 40 of these shatter coins, and most of those are of the water monster type. But this has not been published yet, but we are looking very much forward to seeing this when it appears, and I hope we don't have to wait too long for it. It has been debated what Rerik really is, or Großtrömpendorf, but I think most researchers agree that it is probably a site that was mentioned in the Royal Frankish Annals when the Danish king Godfred, he moved the merchants from a site called Rerik to a site called Hejsebo, where he founded what was to become Hedeby Hejsebo, the very successful trading town that I will talk a bit about later also. And in the Royal Frankish Annals, they say that the Danish king, he used to have a big income on Rerik because he was able to tax the site. So it seems to have been associated with the Danish king, even though it's situated on the southern Baltic coast. Then we jump to the eastern part of the Proto-Danish realm, to the site called Aarhus in Scania. And Aarhus is also quite difficult archaeologically because Aarhus also became an important medieval town, but that was relocated, so it's not sitting on top of the remains of the oldest part of the settlement. So that has also become plowing fields and has more or less been destroyed in that way. And also, it seems as if the oldest part of the settlement, called Aarhus 1, there on the site, only very small parts of that has been excavated. So there are still many questions about Aarhus, but what is clear is that a lot of glass bead making went on there, and it was the same blue and white and red beads as those that were made in Ribe. And what is very funny or interesting about Aarhus is also that the medieval village just outside of the town of Aarhus is actually called Ripa. And it's the same as Ribe in Latin, and Ribe was also called Ripa in the first mentioning in a written source. So I think it's quite possible that also Aarhus was actually called Ripa. And of course, Ripa is a Latin word meaning riverbank. So that might have been the first name for Aarhus. And despite only very small areas have been excavated, still 3 of these modern monster shatter coins have also been found in Aarhus. So what is it actually we are looking at with these trading towns? We have done a lot of archaeology in Ribe, and we can see from the wonderful stratigraphy that we have a coin economy in the 8th century based on the Wodan monster shatter. We also have done a lot of, or our good colleagues in Germany have done metal detecting on Rerik and have found out that there's also quite a lot of Wodan monster shatters being used on that site. And then we have very limited excavation in the earliest parts of Aarhus, but still also some present Wodan monster shatters. And if we try and apply the border zone theory, you could actually see that Ribe is situated in the border zone towards the Frisian areas. And you can also see that Rerik is situated in the border zone between both the Saxons living south and the Slavs living to the southeast, and the Danes. And also Aarhus is situated in the border zone between the Danes and the Swedish tribes. So it actually fits quite well with Hodges's theory from the Dark Age economy book. And that also sort of indicates that if we should look for a center in this realm, and we have the borders out here, it becomes quite clear that the center is probably Lejre, which is actually also the legendary seat of the first Danish kings, as mentioned by the medieval historian Saxo and many other early sources. And if we jump to Lejre, quite large excavations have been made there, but they have not been carried through. They have only taken off the topsoil and sort of drawn up what was underneath, but they have not excavated all these wonderful hall buildings. But still, just from drawing it up in the plan here, you can see that it's actually the largest hall we know from all of Scandinavia. It is 61 meters long and something like 11 or 12 meters wide. So this is a very substantial site, and I think this is actually the royal hall of the Danish kings of the 8th century. So if we take a look at the archaeological record from Denmark in the 8th and 9th century, we have some problems because, of course, we would like to excavate wonderful royal graves full of weapons and jewelry and helmets and so on. And of course, they have those in Sweden, where they have the Vendel and the Valsier cemeteries with all the high status stuff. We don't have that in Denmark, so we simply do not have a custom of aristocratic burial in the 8th and 9th century. So we don't know what they did to the kings or the real aristocracy when they died. And you can speculate, were they buried at sea, as is also said in some written sources, or were they or were they cremated in a way so that we don't find them? And for a long time we thought, well, we do not have all this wonderful stuff that we know of from Swedish archaeology. But since metal detecting has been going on now for some decades, we can see that we have had exactly all the same wonderful stuff as they have in for instance, Sweden, but it's not really embedded in the burial customs. So we do not have aristocratic burial in the 8th and 9th century. What is also missing is that we do not have any deposition of hoards. In the old days, you would perhaps say that could mean that it was a poor society, but you can also turn the argument around and say that it was a society where there was no need to hide away your wealth because there weren't any threats towards it. So it can also be a sign of peaceful times, actually. And what we also have in Denmark in the 8th and 9th century is that we actually have 3 of these trading towns, the Emporia, and all of those are unfortified. There are no walls or moats or anything. So if there was anyone who was able to threat them, they were quite easy to capture. But still, there is no sign of anything going on there. So it could also be that no one really dared to attack the Danish king's trading towns. And then, of course, we have some sites which also tells us that there was someone who was able to conduct quite large projects, like building the wooden Kanhave channel across Samsø, an island in sort of the middle of the Danish realm, and also the border wall facing towards the south. Dannevirke was also enlarged in 737. We know that from dendrochronology. And that was also quite a huge project. So this indicates that there must have been some sort of quite strong royal power. We also have some written sources which indicate that there was a quite strong royal power. And it seems as if these quite peaceful times where the supremacy of the kings situated in Lejre, that really remained uncontested until around 870. And I mean, even the Franks did not really dare to attack the Danes. So it seems as if the 8th and early 9th century had been a very strong period in the history of the early Danish kingdom. So what happens in the 9th century? The big change is, of course, that the site of Rerik is moved to Hedeby. And this happens in 808, which is mentioned in the Royal Frankish Annals. And of course, there has been done wonderful archaeology in Hedeby. So we know quite a lot about the development of this huge trading town. And what really happened was that we moved from a system where there was 3 emporia to a system where there was only one that was the really big one, which totally overshadowed the other ones. So Hedeby during the later 9th century became the large international trading hub of Northern Europe. So in many ways, Hedeby succeeded Dorestad, which was also burned down by Vikings in the 830s. So what Dorestad was in the 8th century, Hedeby became in the 9th century. And if you want to read more about Ribe and also some of the other emporia, you can do that in my book, which came out here in 2020. And there are also some other papers in English, and otherwise you can also look me up. I am on different research portals and so on. And I think I have been speaking now for almost an hour, so I think I will end my talk here. And I hope that my Portuguese friends will take over now and perhaps start a discussion. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much for your speech, for your conference. It was very interesting. We have some questions in the chat. Can I start one each time, or you want to go by groups?
I think you can help me through the questions. Will I be able to see the questions?
Yeah. I'm gonna start with the last one. This is from the member of the group, Luciano de Campos. Can you see this one?
Yes, I can. Well, the main traces, what survives best in the archaeological record is, of course, the animal bones, which can be studied, but really on the large scale, of course, it was cereals. A lot of barley was and rye was grown on the fields, and that probably was what was consumed on the largest scale. There's been quite a lot published from Ribe and also some big projects looking at macrofossils and animal bone and so on. So, but the big staple in the diet was, of course, the crops that were grown on the fields.
Nice. Okay, the next one is from Johnny, but you already answered, so he asked me just to ignore his question. Then I go to the next question. It's from Professora teacher Luciana de Campos again. In Ribe, you can read this one?
Yeah. Yes. I think we have excavated the workshops where they made the glass beads. And of course, with the glass beads, it's important to know that glass beads were produced in Ribe until the middle of the 8th century, 760, 770 or so. But after that, glass beads production ceased, and then they start importing finished beads. But in the earlier part of the 8th century, a lot of glass beads were produced. And we have excavated these workshop where they made them, and you can find all the raw materials that they used and all the different waste products from the different phases of the production. So there is no doubt that the glass bead maker also resided in the house where the glass beads were made.
And about the silk part, there's any...
To my recollection, no. But also silk, of course, does not survive very well in the archaeological record, only if it's placed close to something that made from copper alloy, so that it can be preserved in the corrosion. But no, I don't think we have silk found in Ribe. There is from Haithabu, I know, but not from Ribe. But of course, Haithabu also has this wonderful harbor where it's totally waterlogged, so they have wonderful preservation. We are not quite as fortunate.
Oh, thank you. And now, finally, a question from Professor Johnny.
Yes. Yes, we have this lead model, which has been published as Odin from Ribe, and it's quite difficult to find out whether does it actually portray Odin or not, and also if the Odin from Ribe is an unstratified find. It was actually a surface find from some redeposited soil. So we have no idea really how old it is. And it is also a very rare type because we've done so much metal detecting during the last decades all over Denmark. And this type of object does not really turn up. So it's a rare thing. But we do know that there are some pagan amulets that comes out of the archaeological record and has been found with metal detectors. But most of them are actually quite late. They are from the conversion period in the 10th century. So today we're a bit concerned whether our Odin from Ribe really is Odin or not. It's a discussion.
Thank you. We have, I think it's the same question from Gisele Leoncio. She asked it about, I think, 3 times the same thing. So I'm going to highlight it the last time she asks. In your slide, you show a coin once.
Oh, yes. I think I forgot to say that in my presentation. It's called a Wodan monster shatter, but that's totally speculation. That was suggested by a German numismatist in the 19th century. So there is, in my view, nothing to indicate that the guy with all the hair that should be a depiction of Wodan. I think it's much more likely that it's a depiction of a king, and what we see is a king wearing a helmet and with some crest, feather crest or something like that instead. So we don't believe that the coin depicts Wodan, Odin. Nice. And again, back to the question, yes, these coins were produced in Denmark. Some think they were minted in Ribe, but we don't know. They could also be minted in the King's Hall at Lejre. We really don't know. But if we look at the distribution of the coins, it seems quite clear that the Danish type, which is the most where you have the most finds of, was minted in Ribe or in Denmark. But again, it's very complicated, and there is also an insular variant that you find on the British Isles, but that looks a bit different and was probably just the model for the Ribe coin. But my colleague Claus Beweile, who is a skilled numismatist, is doing a large research project at the moment, and I hope the result will be a book which explains to everyone how things are connected. So you will have to look out for that.
Thank you. Let me see if there's another one. If there's not, I'm going to make my question. Let's see. Mais alguma pergunta? Se alguém tiver uma pergunta, você pode perguntar que eu traduzo. If you want to have in Portuguese, I can translate the question. Okay, if nothing yet, I'm going to do a question about something you talk about. In the slide 18, Søvsø, you criticizes the art about the reconstruction, historical reconstruction, because it doesn't reflect the latest interpretation and conclusions of the most recent research. Given that the research in archaeology, 18, I think, it's an art, a drawing. Given the archaeological work and then it's funded by the state, how you think it's going to be the updating work the government going to pay? Is going to be a founder, a book? How does this work in your country for someone who doesn't know?
Well, there are roughly two ways you can do archaeology in Denmark. Either you do rescue archaeology, where you excavate something before it is being destroyed by a new building or a new road or something that is being planned. And when it's that type of archaeology, then it is the developer or the one who destroys the archaeology who has to pay for the archaeology. But still, it is limited how much money they can pay. So you cannot fund a big research project also on it. But you can do a decent excavation, and that's like 98% of all archaeology that's been done in Denmark. That is rescue archaeology. But of course, if you want to do things really good and use all the modern materials and so on and methods, you want to do a real research excavation where you apply all the latest methods and so on. And thankfully, we were able to be part of a project where Professor Søren Sindbæk from Aarhus University got a big grant from a big private foundation in Denmark. So we were able to do a really good excavation of 80 square meters, and that has been published in the Northern Emporium project. There are 2 big English volumes out about that excavation. So if you want to see what you can do when you really have the money you need to do it in a top-of-the-line way, you should look at those books. And it was that excavation where we were able to also pinpoint where do we want to excavate if we want to get the answers. And what we knew, of course, we had a suspicion that this reconstruction drawing was not correct, but we had never been able to excavate really the front part of any of these houses. We had only had trenches that went through them, crisscross and so on. So it was very difficult to find out, but we were able to find one place where we could actually excavate. So we excavated 80 square meters, and that revolutionized the way that we see the settlement in Ribe. And we were able to do micromorphology and all this, and 3D recording and so on. And you should try and look at these Northern Emporium publications. They are quite nice. And now I lost your audio to the presenter.
I'm sorry, the mic was off. Thank you so much. I think we don't have any more questions. I just wanted to thank you in the name of the group in the event. Just stay over here after we go offline, but I'm going to talk to you. And now I'm going to speak in Portuguese to the people listening. Muito obrigado a todos que estiveram presentes hoje conosco durante a segunda conferência do nosso 12º encontro. Amanhã teremos mais, de manhã continuaremos nosso evento e, por favor, retornem para próximas palestras, mini-cursos. Hoje à noite ainda teremos, na realidade, hoje à noite ainda teremos um mini-curso Então, por favor, continuem conosco mais tarde. Até mais, até a próxima.